Welcome to Super Connected with me, Tim Arnold, and my special guests. We invite you to join us in an intimate and honest exploration into the theme of connection. What it means to be connected to each other, what it means to be connected to ourselves, and what it means to connect in an ever-changing world. Willie Dowling is a multi-instrumentalist, composer, producer, performer with a long-standing experience of writing underscore and theme tunes for film and TV in a wide variety of styles and genre. Over the years, Willie has fronted, composed, produced and toured his own bands. One of those bands which I toured with him with my band, including among his bands the influential rockers Honeycrack and Jackdaw 4. He's also written, played, sung, produced for artists like Dr. Hook, Midure, Hot Chocolate, The Wild Hearts, Choir Boys. List goes on. Willie is somebody that has been involved in all important music that's been coming out of the United Kingdom for several decades.
I'm not sure that's true.
Well, for me, definitely a massive influence on me as well. He's too impatient for a proper introduction. So please welcome Willie Dowling. Willie, how are you?
I'm in peak condition, I'm glad to report. How are you? How's things over in London?
Yeah, it's obviously London has just kind of got to lockdown. And
has it? That's official now?
Well, I don't know. It's official as far as the media's concerned, and everybody's behaving like we're on lockdown. But no, the government still haven't done a proper instruction. It's funny, we can talk about things without even mentioning coronavirus, but I will mention it now in case people listen to this in years to come and go, what are they talking about? You know, I'm sure they'll know. Where are you at the moment?
I'm actually talking to you from my studio in France, where I've been for the last few weeks. I think we're sort of a week or 2 weeks in front of the English approach, and I do mean English as opposed to British approach.
Yes.
It seems that there's a very different set of ideas according to the country you're in right now. I'm pleased to see that they're finally doing something that is a little closer to how the Europeans are approaching the whole crisis. But anyway, yes, I'm in France at the moment.
And but you have family back in the UK, do you? Yeah, and loved ones who obviously are keeping you updated on the way things are going here.
Yeah, like a fool, I've been because we're quite isolated where I am in France. We're miles from the nearest town, so I've been getting my news from where everybody else is, terrestrial TV and the ubiquitous social media. And I can't quite convince myself that that's a good idea because, my God, it goes in waves. We're like sort of fish. And there's a sort of ripple of optimism that spreads out, and within a matter of hours or minutes sometimes, that suddenly seems to go in the reverse direction. It's a very peculiar thing socially that we're experiencing right now.
Yeah, and obviously that's a lot of what I love talking about on this show. It's socially, and what we have left to connect with, which unfortunately it just seems to be the internet at the moment, or fortunately because it's making some people feel less anxiety.
I was contemplating that last night, and I was thinking how much worse it might be in the absence of that. But I can't be certain that that's a true reflection, because if you never had it, then you would only be dealing with what you knew existed. One can't help but feel that were, say, the internet to go down, then the feeling of isolation would be hugely magnified, just because we've become so conditioned into accepting that that's the way we're trading information these days. It would be awful. And yet, there you go, we lived for the best part of the 20th century without it.
Yeah, and some of us are, lucky to have experienced both sides of this incredible transition into, most of our communication being virtual. It's funny, just introducing you to any listeners who are new to your work. I know you obviously from the 1990s, touring with you, and really, anybody listening, Willie's a huge influence on me in terms of understanding and appreciating the craft of songwriting, performance and production. I mean,
and look where it's got you.
Yeah, it's all your fault. No, really though, there are certain artists who they do what they do and it's good, and then there are other artists where you, like yourself, where I look at somebody like you, Willie, when you're working on a new album, new project, and kind of think, what's he after? He's trying to do something there. It's a difference between a rabbit just comfortably sort of finding their home and one that just won't stop digging holes until they found the right one. And
I'm flattered to hear this, Tim, and I wished I could make sense of it with an intelligent response, but I don't have one. But I am flattered. Thank you.
I mean, in terms of the multi-genre approach that you've had on a lot of your albums. That when I first heard that with Honeycrack, that gave me permission to to have the kind of career I've had making albums, which is I don't have to do anything that any genre, in any particular genre. I can just keep skipping around, and that's what I've done. I don't think I would have taken that approach without sort of hearing how you crammed 50 different genres into 4 minutes once.
Yeah, well, again, I'm tempted to say that hasn't served either of us particularly well in terms of public awareness.
Well, but then it's,
you do what's in your
you've got to
soul,
do what's
I
in
guess.
you, and you've got to be, and you do inevitably find people that love that sort of approach, and of course it might not be in what we would term as popular mainstream sort of music communities, but my God, there's still a lot of people who like to hear, I don't know, a more it's like crazy mad scientist approach to musical instruments and singing.
I guess, but I don't think there's a wrong or right to the approach. One can only assume that people that are perfectly satisfied listening to, death metal and nothing else, derive the same sense of satisfaction from it. It's not like if only everybody would wake up to it. There is no sort of central point that we're all striving towards, I don't think. It just so happens that I get bored very easily, and I've never been particular, with one exception, been a fan of bands specifically. It's always been songs that have struck me as important, and that sort of leads to a much wider set of influences, I guess, that sneak in at the sides rather than just being concerned with one particular genre.
I mean, I think I'm right in saying that you would have begun writing songs by looking at other people's songs that you loved and trying to understand how they did this and how they did that, how did they manage to achieve something harmonically or whatever it was. Which is how I started as well. It was like, I want to do a song that makes me feel like that guy's song. I guess
a wee bit, but I cards on the table. I'm so lazy that the exception that I was referring to was the Beatles, who struck me at an age that they became massively significant, and their output was much as you're describing now, so varied and so sort of dependent upon whatever the arrangement or the style. The song was the thing that struck you.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that there's a wrong or a right to this. It's just that's what caught me at an impressionable age, and that's essentially all I've been trying to do since. It's the interesting stuff that has snuck in since then that I've not been aware of. So, for example, the Beatles, hands down, my first and foremost band. And yet for years there was, in reviews of albums, everything from the Honeycrack stuff, the Grip stuff, Jackdaw 4 stuff, where in amongst the various influences that they would cite, there would be things like the Beach Boys and XTC. Now, I swear to God, I'd never heard Pet Sounds until I was 35 years old. I had no idea that's who I was ripping off. But apparently, I say ripping off, I suspect, and because it's a genuine thing, because I didn't know these people, that you draw from the same well. XTC is the most recent one. It was only my good friend and partner in crime in the Dowling Pool, John Poole, who kept sort of very gently saying, "Oh, you should listen to XTC. You'd like them." And I tried. I remember on one occasion, really on his account, listening to XTC, and I did the worst thing: downloaded far too much, far too quickly, and it just struck me as so obtuse.
Yeah.
But by degrees, again, being gently encouraged by John, "Oh, no, you should try this track." And when I did it that way, sort of 5 or 6 songs, I suddenly got it and realised, oh my God, I see what people are talking about in these reviews. I do sound a bit like XTC. I never set out to. The Beatles, I will confess to. XTC and the Beach Boys snuck up on me. I didn't know them.
Yeah, you mentioned the Dowling Pool, which is, of course, your latest band, and we are going to talk about that as well, because I was like, there's some questions I really want to ask about the Dowling Pool. But yes.
Well, I was going to say that under ordinary circumstances, I would be doing this interview with the sole intent of shamelessly promoting the Dowling Pool's new album, See You, See Me. But
you don't have to, though, because I'll shamelessly promote it for you. It's fine.
Well, that's very sweet of you. But do you know what I mean? It does feel very, very tacky to be trying to punt stuff.
Yes and no. I think people who love music and are, there are different groups among music fans these days. Some of them quite greedy, and they don't really think too much about how the music they listen to gets made. And then there's lots of them who really know that musicians need attention and a bit of support as well, because it's a really, really hard thing to make music and sustain any kind of living these days. So yeah, there'll be. I think it's all right, to share the work that you've been doing.
Well, I think that's a sort of dangerous point, though, isn't it? In terms of sort of a philosophical approach to this, is there is an ugly side to that, and it's one that I've fallen prey to time and time again. Is the search for validation for what you do, and we measure this in very specific ways. It used to be exclusively record sales and people through the door at gigs, and nowadays it's downloads and God knows whatever else. In amongst the mush of stuff that's out there on the internet. But it's a very dangerous path to follow. And
do you know what I think with you, and certainly with my own music as well? I think we've hit a point in history where it's so oversaturated with content out there. There's a sea of content, and people just kind of clamber from one wave to the other. That quite often, I just think people are interested in finding out about somebody who's passionate about something, whether it's music or writing a book or anything, or acting. I think that's as complicated as it needs to get now. It's like, oh, that guy or that woman is really passionate about what they do, and that's
I guess so. I can't.
That works more than I think any of the marketing. Everybody's too clever for marketing. Everybody knows we're just being sold at.
I guess so. The point that I was veering towards was that my experience has been that the search for validation is the point where it becomes so much harder, and the thing that returns me. You sound like you've got a
codependency issue like me.
yeah. I mean, it's big.
Who wants everybody to love us?
Addiction. Yeah, but so the question is would then be when you're not validated album after album, why continue to do it? And I have an answer for that.
Oh, but I want to know that. Yeah, please.
It's because of the intrinsic value of the process.
Yeah.
You realise that the amount of time you spend worrying and about how many likes you get and how many sales you have destroy the most important part of why you go back to it from time to time. And I'm sure you'll recognise this. But there is a moment in this studio or sat in front of a piano when the realising of an idea, when you bring something to completion, a lyric and a melody and a set of chords, is so personally valuable to you that really is the only reason to keep on doing it. It's because it's the one thing that you've got in your life that brings a reward, that makes you feel like you belong, that
and that was easier, I guess, when we met, when we were touring together in the 90s. It was slightly easier then, was it? To be able to... I
don't know. I mean, that sort of... it was only a limited level of success Honeycrack had, but when it did happen, I was already quite an aged fella by that point, or
aged, I think, more experienced, we can say. I think aged.
Well, I've been around the block a few times, and it brought a whole set of new problems to the table. None of which were comfortable. It was almost like the process of seeking out that thing that was so elusive for so many years suddenly had this whole bag of other stuff that unleashed upon you that was just as dreadful as being out in the dark and nobody caring. So I don't have a sensible response to that, other than the intrinsic value of doing something that brings you joy. That's the reason to do it.
Let's see if I'm really genuinely interested. And these shows are just conversations, often with either people that I don't know, and there's something we've got in common, or somebody I do know, like now. And so do you you made an album? Set it for the argument's sake. Say there's 10 tracks on the album, and we know each song, each lyric. We know the moments we went to ourselves. That's a good line. There's a chord sequence that we've just come up with, and we think even Lennon or Brian Wilson didn't find that one. This is really cool.
Yeah, touching the hems of the grace. That's a good feeling.
And then you do another song that there's another song which you were happy with for a couple of months, and then suddenly you came up with an extra bit, and you went and you worked on it for another 3 or 4 weeks, and you're in love with it, basically. And so all these different things, and also you've cross-referenced bits of politics that are current. You've cross-referenced things in some of the songs to do with the society that we're living in. There's all these things you think, God, this will really resonate with people. They're going to love this, And you do that for 2 years, maybe. And then you're presented with, it's done. I have to share this now. So you can tell how I feel about that. I've done it. How do you feel when you get to that moment? This is our connection more than any other, I think.
I hate that moment. And it's nuanced because this one is slightly different. I've done my level.
The Dowling Poole album.
Yeah, see me. I've tried insofar as is possible to be completely removed from the promotion process. Of course, it hasn't been entirely successful because I have stepped back onto social media, which is a mixed bag. But there's been a huge relief about not having to worry about sales, about the promotion, about the press release, about
because someone else is doing that.
Someone else is doing it, and I mean, it won't make a blind bit of difference one way or another in terms of what the thing does. It'll fly or it won't fly. But just personally, it's a huge relief. And what it's done uniquely on this occasion, which has never happened to me before, when I finished a record, there's been this several months afterwards where just trying to rid oneself of the huge amount of time and effort you put into it, it's a bit like releasing the breath and looking at what happens, and it's always disappointing. On this occasion, because I've been attempting, insofar as is possible, not to look at it, I found myself going back into the studio and writing songs far more quickly than I've ever done before in my life. Now, I don't know whether
after this record was finished.
Yeah, when this record was finished, I started on the next one. I started recording more songs. I've never done that before. But again, I think for practical reasons as much as anything else, I've always been part and parcel of the, now get it to the PR, blah, blah, blah. And it's hard to be creative when you're now dealing with the outside world. For me, anyway.
Your advice, in a way, to me on my next album...
I don't have any advice, Tim. Be careful how you phrase that.
The advice that we can take from what you're saying would be it might be a more rewarding experience to really have somebody else dealing with the constant promotion and sharing of your work than doing it all yourself.
Yeah, a bit, but that's just my experience, and it's not entirely what I was saying. Is that process, if you let it, that post-album recording, mixing process, will destroy the creative impulse, or certainly has done for me. So I don't know if it's true for everybody else.
Yeah.
Some people are brilliant. I've always been massively impressed at your output. You just continue to do songs. You continue. Now, that's not my experience up until very recently, like I was saying. More often than not, I've taken ages to make a record. I finally finished it, and it's almost like I've been so exhausted by what follows after that I can't bring myself, because I'm invariably disappointed by the end result.
Your level of exploring the possibilities of songs are much wider than I do with my songs. I mean, you know, I explore maybe, I don't know, half a dozen versions, and then I cut it. You're exploring, I don't know, 1,000 versions of your song, and then having a bit of each of them.
Yeah, but
mix.
That's not a choice that we make on an artistic level. What do you think?
You're suffering with that. It's an affliction.
No. I've just been fucking very, very lucky. I have facilities that allow those kind of processes to come into play.
Yeah.
If you don't have a lovely little studio where you can sit out and you've got all the gear you need and you can essentially do most of it on your own, then it's a very different process that you must experience. Now, I can't be sure about that, but I'm guessing it would be that way. And it makes no sense to me that one would make a comparison and go, here's how to do it. This guy's got it right. No, I've been fucking lucky over the years. And it just so happens that I've fallen into a space where that's a possibility for me. For most people, it isn't.
Yeah. What do you think about the performing live online in context of what we're in the middle of at the moment, where everybody is self-isolating and social distancing, and of course every festival this year has been cancelled, venues are closed, theatres are closed, so what is left is this thing that we've had for quite a few years now, which is performing in front of cameras that other people can see on screens. Where do you stand with that, Willie? I'm asking you as well because I'm doing a gig like that online later. I just wonder.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, and I don't, as a rule, I don't do that sort of.
I'm not qualified to say. I've read these posts from musicians saying, "Oh, the tour's been cancelled, so the merch has gone, the sales have gone. I got nothing, and my heart bleeds." Again, only through circumstances, through pure luck. I don't, at this present moment, have those kinds of primary concerns that I need to get some sort of income. So there's one evil side of me that thinks, oh, God, don't exploit this to sell your dross. And the other side goes, no, I'm not qualified to make that kind of judgment because I don't have to. So it seems to me that it's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And again, I think from a sort of utilitarian point of view, I could see that some people, if I can judge from the Facebook responses to, because there's lots of people doing these, people seem to like them, people seem to appreciate them. So it's not for me to say, oh, I wish you wouldn't do.
What about the fact that just even I, as I mean, we're friends, but I'm a fan as well. People just feel happy because they'll see you doing one of your songs online.
There you go. And I agree. I think at this present moment, and I reserve the right to change my mind tomorrow. At this present moment,
so.
It doesn't quite work for me, and certainly put it this way, I've had no requests to do so. So
that's the thing, though. I've not had a request to perform live in 18 months, and I haven't done a gig in 18 months.
I saw that little thing that you did with Andy Lewis. I think you were up at his place. Andy, I should say, was in Tim's band Jocasta, which is where I met him, and now he played with Jackdaw Fall constantly. And on the rare occasions the Dowling Poole do anything live, Andy's
he's in
on
most
bass.
of your bands, isn't he? He's been in all of your bands.
Oh, yes, of course. There was one. I always forget this.
Sugar Plum Fairies.
Yes, that's right.
Jackdaw Fall. Yeah. But we did.
I saw that thing you did, and it just reminded me of the 1990s. Was it Go? I think I saw you do.
Yeah, we did. We did 4 tracks from the album.
And what was that great song I saw you doing? You'd gone out with a mask on and done a little video. I think before there was a real sense
of panic. The Land of Do As You Please.
That's a great song, man. That's a really good song. Do I know that, or did that? It hit me as a new song. Did you play that live?
We played it once, and I remember where we played it. We played it in Cambridge in 1996, and it was really hard to do live. But I mean, it was meant to be the track on the first track on the Jocasta album, but we ended up doing I don't know, so many different things with that album that it ended up as a B-side.
It was a very good song and a very effective little video you did for that as well.
Thanks,
it was
man.
very compelling. I watched it from beginning to end. I never do that.
Oh, thank you. Long before I had the mask anyway because I have a bike. But it sort of looks like
a great way to cover up that you can't fucking sync the vocal as well.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Easiest lip sync I've ever done. Yeah.
No, but it's very effective. I was trying to second guess the way you did it because it looked initially like you were reversing the crowd coming towards you, and then it occurred to me afterwards, no, because I can't see his lips. You've done that, in fact, the other way round. You've been walking towards them, and I've been seeing people walk away. Would that be right?
I like the fact that you've spent some time like going through the nitty gritty of my work because I thought it was just me that did it about your work. So it was nice. But seriously, what do you think? Like for the last, I don't know, 10 years, I've not done a lot of, live gigs online where people are just sort of tuning in. And I don't know if you have. And the reason I haven't done it is because
one.
You did one. But it feels to me, I don't know. There's one emotion that happens when I'm in front of another human, like we're standing on the same ground. And there's a different emotion when we're having exactly the same conversation, but we're looking at screens. We're seeing each other, and it's great. And I know grandparents seeing their grandkids when they live far away, and it's so important. But it's a different type of emotion, isn't it?
Again, I'm not qualified to judge. The one time I did.
What do you feel when you the difference between I don't think there's an either or, but I think some people are confused on what they're getting.
I don't know, Tim. I'm out my depth. I don't know. I did that once. I think when we released our second album, what the hell was that called? One Hyde Park. We did a live broadcast, a band broadcast from the studio, and all I recall of that was watching it back and listening to it and thinking, God, the sound is fucking terrible. I wished I'd never done it. But there you go. That's just my response. I don't think I'm qualified to make a good assessment of this on this or anything else. Come to that.
But on XTC. You can say a few things. Now, you mentioned before that band had really inspired and influenced you, although you didn't know, which makes me think, I've mentioned it before on one of these shows, that I think there's a big atmosphere of song that goes around the planet, and that, you see some bits of it, and, Beethoven sees some bits of it, and Lennon and McCartney see some bits of it, and we all get a chance to see different bits of it. You got the same bit, I think, haven't you, as XTC?
Really?
You're both tuned into the same thing.
That works in other ways as well. There are songs that will have gone through that same process of connectivity with a song that you or I wouldn't even begin to understand why that's important. But at least we have to be generous enough to assume that it's working for someone somewhere. I don't get it. I don't get it. But it must be the same process. So there's your connectivity, if you like. The idea that it's exclusive, that we will make a connection universally, is a failing. But then I've often thought that this is a significant difference between your view of the world and my view of the world. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I've often thought that my approach is kind of more stoicism, and you seem to be very attracted to the mystical, the notion of something other going on that is appealing and that therefore qualifies its value. I don't know I'm doing this argument justice.
Yes, I think, yeah.
I see human beings as lumps of clay and nothing more and nothing less. And they are imprinted on throughout their lives massively at the beginning of their lives, and less or so as we age and become set in our ways. And
I agree with that as well. I think it's both. I think our approach is. I think it's both of those.
Okay, I still don't quite understand your attraction to the mystical. I want to qualify that and say no, that's not mystical at all. That's just human beings doing what they do, searching for answers, searching for reasoning chaos, and in fact, chaos is what is there.
Yeah, chaos is definitely there, and I'm kind of glad it's there. I like chaos, but I think mysticals, it's just a word for the things that we will believe are in our lives or in our consciousness or in our souls that we can't show, express, or even find a language to talk about it in.
No, we can, though. We can rationalise it.
Well, yeah.
On the simplistic level, we can say something like
perhaps some things...
a trite, trivial love song means nothing to us, and then we break up with our other half, the most important person in our lives, and suddenly that cheesy, shitty song that has been around forever is suddenly speaking to you. Now, this tells me that there is no pattern to this. It's just what we need at that moment. It's the lumps of clay responding the way lumps of clay do. I can't buy into the idea that there is a purpose to all of this nonsense and that somehow our objective is to seek it. I prefer the stoical approach that life essentially is painful and awful, and our duty and objective is to deal with that.
Yeah.
But the Stoicism actually should work for you because it has a sort of connection with Buddhism, I think, to a certain extent. Would that be fair?
It is, yeah. I mean, I don't call myself a Buddhist, but of course, having spent time in a Buddhist monastery and all the rest of it, there's lots of tips I've taken, but yeah. The idea of everything being impermanent, I do agree with. Do you think the advancement in tech recording, which we both use enormously in our music, do you think that is a challenge for some people in terms of when you've got very little to work with, you tend to use up a lot of your imagination, and then when you've got every tool known to man in front of you on a screen, you can go down a wormhole,
I do.
And so music like that, like which I don't know, to me XTC, like the Beatles, it's the equivalent of in music of I don't know, explorers like Shackleton and people going off to other parts of the world that have never been explored before.
If I understand your point, I think I agree with it. It's been technology has been a burden and a saviour in the same breath. I can't speak for XTC, but in my experience, it's the complication has been that the early recordings of early bands that I did were very simplistic and very easy to achieve because you weren't thinking about what the orchestra might do at this point. Yes. And that has undoubtedly slowed the process down. The more I've been interested in arrangement and how differently I might approach certain parts of the song are a world apart from the sort of brute force of Honeycrack or something like that. But the flip side of that coin is it means that one can labour. You can disappear down rabbit holes trying to create this peculiar arrangement that I realise on certain occasions are so self-indulgent and nonsense that I have to get rid of them, and I've just wasted 6 months.
But there's a tribe of certain human beings that are looking for those kind of that odd chord and that odd movement, that strange shift in the composition, which some of those people that are looking for are musicians, and some of them aren't. It strikes me as quite a unusual tribe. I had that with when I first started writing as well, with one of the Jocasta songs. I remember I took some strange jazz chord out of a Fats Domino song or something, and put it in what was indie rock, and people used to like it, but they wouldn't know why. And I just think that's funny. They like that, and other people were like, "That's weird." And how do we identify that tribe? It's weird. I don't know if they exist. Are they still here?
I think the only insight that I have to that is what I was alluding to earlier on, is that the reverse works too. And I know it works too because occasionally it works for me too. I can listen to an AC/DC track which has none of those qualities and still feel the same level of excitement and joy that I get out of the simplicity, the brute force of it.
And the attitude,
I think the only thing that I would say is that it's never been enough. I want a bit of that pie. The idea that all of one's joy comes from just one approach to this stuff has never worked for me. Worked for me. But in the same breath, I have to say it clearly works for other people. So I really don't want to dismiss it as irrelevant.
Staying on the theme of connection, you, I think more than any other contemporary songwriter and producer that I know, you connect different genres together like it's an addiction. I mean, you really have those very kind of violent shifts in your music a lot of the time, which I feel are there to disorientate the listener, and by default then you stimulate the listener. Can you talk about that a bit? I mean, I've always adored that part of your work, and I can hear your love for the craft in it as well. Can you talk about it a bit? What do you go through when you're doing those things, when you're composing those changes?
I would love to say that that's a deliberate, specific approach, that there's some sort of science behind it. But in all honesty, there really isn't. I suspect, for me, it's more about boredom levels. At a certain point, recording a song, I go, no, we've had enough of that. We've had enough. What else might we do with it? But in terms of embracing other styles of music, same thing. I don't sit down and go, right, I haven't done a funk one. Let's do a little bit of... there's a song on the new album called
That's a David Bowie approach.
Is it?
What haven't we done yet?
Oh, maybe so.
Who can we get now?
There's a song on the new record called Hope that I think it's perfectly fair. People have said, he's doing 80s Prince there. And I think that's probably a fair observation. The point that I'm trying to make is that I didn't go, how could I do 80s Prince? How could I get that in here? It's just what happened on the day. It's what moved me at the time. And there's always the same thing. Even in that song, there's a turnaround where suddenly it sounds more like the Beatles. And that's probably nothing more than a reflection of, I'm bored shitless with this endless groove here.
But what I mean with your work is within the body of one song. So take an example like Good Feeling, it's one of the songs on the Honeycrack album on Prosaic. You know, there's some I don't know if you call it death metal, but certainly very heavy guitar passages followed by
Is that the reggae one?
Yeah, a cocktail in the sun in Jamaica. And just with so much light feeling that you don't know where the mosh pit went.
I don't remember, but I'm betting it was driven by the same impulse. I would guess that when I wrote that, I would have probably done exactly the same thing, having written the verse and the bridge or whatever else it was. By the time I got to the chorus, I would have been ready for a break from the relentlessness of it. And that's really not a qualification of good or bad. I think,
but it's fascinating to listen and to hear. And for me, when I was younger, it was one of the things that made me want to continue. You know, there are things that make you want to continue writing and producing and arranging music, and that was one of the things. It was like, oh wow, you can do that.
Do you find it's gotten harder as you've gotten older? Do you still are you still impacted at quite the same rate as you were earlier on in life, or do these things happen far more out of the ordinary and therefore resonate a bit harder with you?
I suppose I've gone a little bit away from the mad construct of the song, and a bit more into trying to, I don't know what you'd call it, trying to delve inside and get something out without messing around with it too much, trying to find.
Well, insofar as I understand you, you do pretty much the same thing. According to the song you're recording at the time, you'll go off on any number of tangents. To this day, you'll use a string quartet, or you'll have what's his name? That lovely fella from Quadrophenia. Doing a little bit in a song.
Right, yeah.
I mean, these are diverse little side streams.
That was the Soho Hobo thing. I mean, the Soho Hobo one was intentionally trying to celebrate as many English versions of popular music, from music hall right up to, you know, ska and reggae, up to kind of Britpop, I suppose. That was the idea behind that album. So I gave myself license to begin with to kind of explore all the different styles that I like.
Was it a preconceived idea, or did it just happen?
You've switched the interview around now.
Because I'm curious, you're asking me the same question, and I think I'm trying to say to you, I don't think about this process.
No,
it
I'm
just
the same.
happens. So what about you?
I'm similar to begin with. I think with the Soho Hobo, I actually, there was a blog called The London That Nobody Sings, which I discovered, and it was really old music hall songs, you know, turn of the century, last century, sorry, not late 1800s, and songs which I started listening to because that was my family background, and then I got into them, and then I started jamming a couple of them, and in a more modern style, and I thought that might be quite interesting to do something along those lines. And then the next day I wrote another song which had nothing to do with any of that, but it was still to do with London and Soho. And slowly, I think by the time when I'm about 4 songs in, then nothing's an accident after that.
Oh, very good, very good. Okay, so a shape appears and you sort of follow the shape.
And then
so I'm lousy at that. John... my partner in crime is very, very good at it. So he will never say, or I can't think of a time he said when I've presented him with something, oh, that's a shit song. But at that stage, 4 or 5 songs into a record, he might say, I don't know that would work for this one. And I would do the same thing to him. I don't know that, you know, the overall shape of this record would be best served by... So I've got a good example, only for people that know what I do. But for example, on the first Dowling Poole record, what was that called? Bleak Strategies.
Yes.
We... didn't put what I think is one of my better, more kind of rocky songs, Honeycrack related, a song called Straw Man, which was about the Jimmy Savile nonsense that was very high in the sort of public awareness thing at the time. And I still stand by it. I think it's a very good song, but it didn't quite work in the context of the record that we were doing. But I'm not a good judge of that. If you look at the Jackdaw 4 records, I think many of them are far more disparate than what we do with the Dowling Poole, and that's John really that is much better
your connection with John was a surprise to you when you first...
Because he's the best human human being I've ever met, bar none. And not only is he an astonishing musician, he's the most decent human guy I've ever come across. I love him. He's made my life infinitely better.
And you both were sort of, like a blind date, suddenly found out that you had a future together. You've made, how many albums are there now with Dowling Poole?
Oh, not that many, only 3.
It's 3 albums, but this has been really consistent. As soon as you started, I mean, it just hasn't stopped.
Well, he forced me to up my game, I think is the truth of the matter. But it would be way too long and boring to go into how that formulated and how it works.
I hope our listeners are going to go and find out about Dowling Poole, because it's it is a connection between two very passionate artists, and you. Even though you talk about being stoic and all the rest of it, I mean, there's one thing that's consistent about all your songs, Willie, is that the passion of your caring about the world is.
Well,
there.
I'm the worst
care.
of contradictions.
You sound like you don't care, but you care so much about everything.
But I don't. I pour all my caring into my song. I'm one of those worst hypocrites in that I would call myself a humanitarian, but I hate humanity. I'm a misanthrope.
I don't
For the most
think
part, the fuckers let me down.
You call out all the bad guys in so many of your songs, all the people that are doing the things that are vile to humanity, for humanity.
Well, that's only because we agree on that.
You wouldn't be calling them out.
But we have a shared idea of who those people are. There are multiple millions of people that will think that I'm, politely targeting the wrong people, and impolitely think that I am the devil incarnate.
I don't think that's. I think we're getting to the point where everybody's coming round to the opinions that you and I share.
Is this what it takes? I'm reading time and time again.
Now,
socialism finally in the UK.
Yes.
All right. How long will that last? The other tragedy of being as old as I am is that I'm a terrible cynic, and it's a curse. It's a curse. There's a song on the record called Hope, which on the face of it would seem to be, superficially, brilliant, a song about hope and how humanity can continue. And of course, it's utter nonsense. The truth of the matter is, I'm saying is that hope is a curse. Hope leads you on to think that something better might, if you only struggle a bit harder. And in fact, hope makes life more difficult. So I'm not a good person to talk about.
And yeah, I think anybody that is a fan of your music would say that it does fill people with hope. It does me. Even the music, I'm not even talking about the lyrical content, the soundscapes of what you do, especially with the harmonies. I mean, it is celestial. It's joyous.
But, Brian Wilson, again, who I was a very late comer to, said this many years ago, that there is something about the human voice that is as close to... I forget the exact wording of it, but, the implication was touching the hem of the angel's skirts or whatever the fuck it might be. And I kind of get that. There is something about... multiple human voices interacting together that is, for the most part, very, very uplifting. And, we respond to that in the way that we do through harmony. And maybe other people do through a chorus that might be sung on a football terrace. I don't know. Do you know, I had this weird dream not that long ago.
You told me about, there was another dream you had recently that you had to tell me about.
That's the one I was about to tell you about.
Oh, it's the same one. Come on.
I noticed your posts, I'm guessing album related, about dreams that I think you're doing in conjunction with a young lady whose name I forget. What's she called?
Kate Alderton.
Yeah. And I've read a few of your posts, and of course, again, being the tragic old cynic that I am, I can't quite come on that journey with you. But around the same time, I had this a week ago, 2 weeks ago, ridiculous dream where the Pope was helping me move some of the furniture around my house, and music was playing in the background.
That must have been such a pleasure for you, knowing how what a supporter of the Vatican you are.
I don't want to think too hard about it, mate. So yes, so as we were moving this chaise lounge or whatever the fuck it was, there was music playing in the background from my iPad.
Yeah.
And suddenly a load of death metal came on. Now, I reacted in the dream thinking, I would have never put this on here. And God, he must be horrified. But he was nodding along with it and named the band and said, oh, yes, I know this track. I thought, oh, I've entirely misjudged you. Wow. I wonder if you'd like my song, Jesus Wants My Soul Back. And I said to him, I could play it to you. I wrote a song and it was immediately mortified because he turned his eyes upon me and went, oh, God, no, that's a terrible, terrible idea. How could you? How could you? And I only, in the dream, tried to rationalise it by going, well, I got the impression you were a bit more open-minded. I thought, it's only a joke. It's funny. It's funny. It's about masturbation.
Which pope was it? This pope, the pope we have currently?
No, visually, I have no recollection of what pope it was or why he suddenly appeared in my dreams.
You just
Jesus
knew
Christ.
It was the pope.
Yeah, it was the Pope. Oh, he was in regalia. He was in full regalia.
We were just describing a dream that Willie had, if you just tuned in. Just in case somebody thought that you'd actually been doing that, Willie.
It won't happen again.
Yeah, so, but that song... it's
an astonishing song, isn't it?
It's the same sort of sneaky manoeuvres with the chords and in terms of they're not bold changes, but they're
a bit. But we
deep.
skipped this. We skipped this with XTC, and I want to go back to it, and indeed this one, because they have this in common. My first attraction to both of those songs is what you are alluding to: this astonishing chord progression, this peculiar voicing of things that are instantly familiar and yet not in the traditional G, A, blah, blah, blah. But it's the third and fourth listen that delivers the goods to me. And again, because I'm lazy, I don't get around to listening to lyrics that quickly.
Same here.
The music has to grab me first, more often than not. And both of those songs, Easter Theatre, because it just refers to the state of nature, mankind's experience, the cyclical nature of what we all go through, the death of the old and the sprouting of the new, came to appeal to me enormously with Easter Theatre. And likewise with Judy Sill, I was struck initially by the beauty of the voice and the astonishing chords, and the lyrics came to me afterwards, thinking, my goodness, how perfect, how beautiful. I mean, it's the closest I get to what I think you live in, spiritual. It's the closest I get to it. There's something that moves me in a way that science will come to understand, and yet I don't at this moment in time.
Well, that doesn't. I think it's we all get there in our own way, and that's what you and I. I think for years we're very different to each other, but we find the same elation in certain pieces of music.
But that's the struggle of humanity, isn't it? To find something that resonates with you to the other person, whether it's meeting somebody new and you go, oh, I like Alan Partridge as well. We're always looking for something to connect us.
Yeah.
And the moment we find it, we occasionally jump on it too hard because we think we're talking to a kindred spirit, and then we find out they're a fascist.
It's just remind me, you're the person that introduced me to Bill Hicks. Which is,
yes, a prophet.
One of the most important comedians ever. I mean, it's so amazing that he exists.
I'm curious to know that you should bring him up. After music, let's just accept music as a given. What is your second go-to that would make you feel connected? Something that sort of makes you feel like, okay, we're all in this together. He's sounding the same things. He's resonating the way I feel about something. Where would you go in the absence of an MP3 player?
Me? With you?
No, just generally. If you can't play music, where are you going to go for solace? Where would you find something that resonates and is at least approaching the level of importance to you that music has? Literature, theatre, what might it be?
It might be theatre, and it might be some literature. But honestly, if it's a really passionate thing that I like connecting to, like really important, which it would have to be to replace music if there was no music. And this is really funny, but it would probably be cooking for somebody.
Oh gosh. There you go. We're massively different.
I love cooking. I can't remember if I ever cooked for you. I love cooking. I love working with food so much, and I like doing it, cooking for myself as well. But really, to me, making a meal for somebody else is a bit like writing a song for people like we do. Yeah, I love it. So I would probably end up going. I did do chefing, in the 90s before the.
Oh, so you did. I recall.
Yeah, it's all the Soho kitchens, that I was in.
Well, we don't share that, but my contribution would be comedy. Comedy for me is the fallback in the absence of music. Comedy, not comedy across the board, but specific comedy, and it's not even that I require political comedy, although I guess it would be fair to say gravitate towards that more often.
I could ask you, Willie, do you like Ricky Gervais?
I have very mixed feelings.
Because he reminds me of you.
Oh, really? God, that's terrible. I noticed also when he did his little musical thing a few years ago, he wore the glasses that I was prone to wear for about 20 years, and immediately he wore them as a spoof. I thought, well, that's it. I've got to get new glasses. Yeah. Yeah. Those Elvis shades.
Yeah.
I mean, I love his comedy. Every so often when I've watched his stand-up, I've been uncomfortable. And I think that depends upon a particular nuance that is different for all of us as to whether you entirely trust I'm pushing it taboos of homosexuality, racism, whatever else, and making you feel uncomfortable. And if you entirely believe that, then it's not a problem. And I think this would probably be why I'm slightly discomforted by him. Every so often, I think he reveals something of his own prejudices. Is that right? Prejudice? I'm not sure what the plural of prejudice is.
I know what you mean.
And so I couldn't say that I am 100% on board with him in the same way I am with Bill Hicks, but I would never miss anything he did. And that was a brilliant series he did recently.
Afterlife.
Yes, I really enjoyed that, whereas I didn't like Derek at all. It had funny moments, but just the basic concept I was uncomfortable with.
Yeah. Just want to go back to that song again, and both the songs that you've chosen, XTC and Judy Sell, they both, I'm risking losing anybody that's listening that isn't really mad about music by saying this. But hopefully everybody will carry on listening. The way those songs are constructed, so, there's a basic layman's set of chords that we often work with as musicians, and you can tell when one chord changes to another and that one changes to another chord, and we kind of go, all right, there's steps, there's steps on a ladder or something. It's like we're going up these different steps. Each step's got its own style, but those songs are different, aren't they? They don't go from one chord to another. They go from one chord to another with lots of mini steps in between that make you not realise that you're going from one chord to another. And I think it's only certain songwriters that like exploring that. You explore it a lot. I like exploring it, but I don't do it all the time. Yeah, and you don't do it all the time either. But it's this in-between thing. It's this trying, and I'm only talking about it because it's come up with other subjects on this show where there's quite often something that we as humans are drawn to that is not trying to define something with too much solidity. We're trying to be fluid, and that's what those two songs make me think.
Well, I might be going way off piste here because I think
I might have just done already.
Well, I'm struggling to rationalise a thought that I'm not entirely comfortable with, but I'll take a risk. I'll go out there with it. I'm going out on a limb here because I'm not sure that this is true, but I'll take a risk with it. There's something, in my experience anyway, having worked with completely untrained musicians, and I'll use John Poole as a good example. He has no musical theory to speak of, and remarkably adept musicians that can read anything that you put in front of them. And it seems to me that these are two very different skill sets. And perhaps with Judy Sill and XTC knowing something of the composers, the complete lack of musical theory and what belongs in this particular progression and doesn't. Actually, that's not true with Judy Sill. I think she was quite a good Bach pianist, but I'll go with it anyway. There's something about not being afraid of stepping outside of the confines of rigid theory that allows the more experimental musicians to find stuff that technically you shouldn't go to, for want of a better expression. And certainly Andy Partridge does this all the time. He's almost ashamed of his lack of musical ability. He talks of chords in terms of colours. He's very dismissive of what he's capable of doing. And I wonder if that's something to do with the fact that you're not confined by the intellectualization of art. I know I'm on thin ice here, but I'll throw it out there.
Not at all. I think this is exactly what we should be talking about, because the delivery system for music in the popular sense now is it doesn't contain a lot of music that's made like that. There's a lot of music that's being made in the way that you're describing, that we're talking about, but and there used to be in pop. There's not so much in pop anymore. Pop is a different beast now, isn't it?
I don't know. Again, a very difficult argument to be certain of. I mean, you just have to watch one of those Top of the Pops 1970s with your hat on that goes, oh, it was great then. And then you watch through a whole episode of that crap and you realise, no, it wasn't. It was full of...
yeah.
Same.
There's always lots...
Yeah, full of fucking shit. Full of utter trite nonsense.
Yeah.
But slightly better, because memory does this, doesn't it? You remember Bowie doing Starman that felt significant, but what you've forgotten was Bacharach doing Sorry I'm a Fucking Lady in between songs. And that's what most of it was about then, and it still is now.
I like the retitling of the Bacharach song.
Isn't that what it was called? Sorry I'm a lady, sorry I'm a lady, I don't want it. God, I'm going to do the whole chorus. And they also did Yes Sir I Can Boogie, so of course, it's a flipped coin. I mean, obviously they redeemed themselves with that one.
And it's exciting, isn't it, to see that I don't know, tech is now making the people with imaginations for that space that we were just talking about, of music that isn't rigid in its theory or anything like that, but tech devices.
I guess so. Again, I'm really out of my depth on that one. I don't listen to music. I don't know. Every so often I'll hear something on the Radio 6 thing that goes on one of the terrestrial.
We talked in the break a little bit about the fact that back in the 90s you were very ahead of the curve, with sort of software and the way things were progressing into digital from analog, and you have a great experience in both disciplines. How is it now? Do you find yourself ever going back? Do you use both? Is your heart still in analog, or do you love using Logic and all the plugins that we use to create the music that we...
Well, nothing other than circumstance conditions that answer. I remember analog, of course. The Honeycrack albums, everything that preceded it was done on analog. But I don't have access to analog, and I'm perfectly happy in my little hole doing digital recordings. I don't have a strong feeling about one being better than the other at all. I mean, I could stretch that further and go, I'm slightly annoyed and frustrated by the fact that digital has sort of presented this ubiquitousness of sound where record after record sounds identical. sounds very, very similar to the previous ones, and that is because we're all using the same technology. But in the same breath, every so often I'll hear something extraordinary. And always, I'm deeply jealous of it. Somebody, and I can't give you a name, somebody doing something so remarkable with technology that I think, oh, Jesus, why aren't I doing that? Because I'm still applying analog
Do
rules.
you have the same old thing that I have as well, which is you hear somebody every so often and go, I want to do, that's what I want. It's why haven't I done that?
I'm only going to fall back on a Lennon quote that resonated with me then and remains true, that Lennon said that in his fallow period, when he wasn't doing anything for about 5 years, he'd say that he'd turn the radio on and mostly it was crap, and he'd rail at the world going, that's terrible, how dare you release that. But every so often when he heard something great, his response wasn't to enjoy it, it was more to be slightly envious of the fact that, oh God, I wished I'd done that. And that actually is my experience through and through. When I hear something brilliant, it takes me a while to just enjoy it rather than be deeply envious of it. It's the human trait. It's an awful thing. Validation. Seeking.
It's also a hope to just keep producing stuff that you really love and you're really proud of. I think with Lennon in that period, I think it was the B-52s was the one that got him back into the studio.
Oh, is that right? Which song
I think
do you remember?
Heard that. Rock Lobster, maybe?
Oh, okay. I do remember reading about that, but didn't he equate it with something that Yoko was doing? He was always trying to draw it. I think I read somewhere years ago that Yoko invented punk rock, apparently.
That's right, yeah. There was that style of singing, wasn't it, that she was doing in 71, and then suddenly there was some of it going on in punk. Maybe he was talking about Lena Lovitch or something like that. I can't remember. Listen, oh God, I could listen to you talking about music forever. I don't know why.
Great, because I've got loads more. Sorry, I don't want to finish now. I've got hours of this shit to deliver.
But listen, I try to ask this, and most of the people I speak to on the show, it's what if you had to think of one connection in your life that you have either tried to hold on to, or it has tried to hold on to you. What is there something that you couldn't shake that was always going to be connected?
Monica.
What?
My missus. I don't quite know how I stumbled into that one, but we've been together for 32 years, and in the absence of anything else, I'll find a way to live with it. But it's crept up on me, and I really resent it, but I can't live without her anymore.
That is such a beautiful way to close the show.
Well, it's not intended to be. It's just a permanent stain on my career.
No, it's true, and that's coming from the big-hearted person that you are, that hides underneath all the
evil
musical genius. Well, no, I mean, from taking that from Lennon, I mean, the acerbic vibes coming out of so many of your songs that delivered with military precision. Don't really tell us that your biggest connection is really the love of your life. I think that's so beautiful. Willie Dowling, thank you so much for joining me on Super Connected, and hope to see you soon, mate.
Thanks, man. It's been a treat to talk to you. Let's do it again.